you're watching Gearz, brought to you by Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals.
In the gearhead world, there are certain vehicles that naturally grab our attention. Things with fire and smoke. And big noises or attitude. Or speed. Will always draw a car person like a magnet.
That's awesome, man!
Because we imagine ourselves riding in or driving those vehicles. There's no question, we like unique mechanical stuff. But sitting near the top of that list is a vehicle that's so unique, it's been known to turn grown men back into children when they spot one, laughing and pointing and carrying on. And one of the main reasons is that these are rare, hard to find. You won't see them on a road because they hang out in the woods, and it leaves big, wide tracks, and it has the ability to go almost anywhere. No, I'm not talking about Bigfoot. I'm talking about the Thiokol Snowcat. With a big, boxy, tank-like appearance, the Thiokol machines utilized a different approach than most tracked vehicles. Instead of big, heavy metal tracks like a tank or a dozer, they used a flexible rubber belting to hold a series of grousers and wheel guides. This design kept weight down and strength very high, and simple trailer tires and axles supported the vehicle, and those tires rolled in angled wheel guides to keep the tracks in place. The big, wide, flexible track was so effective in snow that pretty soon every ski resort, forest service, and military group had a fleet of them to handle steep slopes in snowy conditions. Thiokol had different models like the larger Trackmaster, the mid-size Spryte, and the smaller Imp, but everybody just called them Snowcats. But running through snow was not what Thiokol originally designed these for. Running through all kinds of terrain was the goal. And the magic of the Thiokol design was that they would take the basic chassis and build different cabs and bodies on them based on what the customer needed. However, when the military said that they wanted a Spryte that was not only able to handle any terrain but could also float, the legendary Swamp Spryte was born. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is a Swamp Spryte and why do you call it a legend? I've never heard of one. Well, this is a Swamp Spryte. And the reason you haven't heard of them is because Thiokol did not make very many of these. And over the years, most of them have been cut up and destroyed. So at this point, there's only 3 or 4 of these known to exist, this being one of them. Now, you're wondering, where the heck did you find this thing? Well, a friend of mine hunted down the legend of a floating snowcat for 20 years until he finally found this one sitting out in the woods. Fortunately, I was able to talk him out of it. So now we are going to go through the Swamp Spryte. We're going to show you what made it unique, going to take you for a ride in it, and we're going to do some restoration work on it that you can then use on your project. You don't have to have a Swamp Spryte, but I promise you, you're going to want one of these when we're done with it.
In a world of economic uncertainty, there will always be a need for quality tools and people who can use them. That's why becoming a Cornwell tool dealer is one of the best career moves you can make. With routes available all across the nation, it's a great way to be your own boss, supply high-quality tools to professionals, and make some real money. If you're tired of working for someone else, have the drive to succeed, and want a career that can be successful no matter what happens on Wall Street, there's a Cornwell tool truck with your name on the side.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz and our introduction of the legendary Thiokol Swamp Spryte. one of the rarest and most unique off-road vehicles ever built. Now, you might be looking at this going, okay, so what was the idea behind a tracked vehicle that floated? Well, for Thiokol, it was about creating the ultimate off-road vehicle, something that would handle any obstacle as well as deep water. For example,
You ain't even broke through yet, Mike.
one of the biggest dangers for a snowcat is breaking through the ice on a lake and sinking like a rock. The Swamp Spryte was designed to not do that.
Back up! Back up!
The whole body on the Swamp Spryte was designed to be watertight, with sheet aluminum riveted over the inner steel framework. Every seam and every rivet was sealed with a special goo to keep water out. Unfortunately, a lot of these rear panels and rivets have been replaced over the years, but not very well. So they're going to need to be replaced again and sealed properly before we venture into deep water. The design of the front end is unique on the Swamp Spryte, with a flat nose and no air inlets to let water in. Air for the radiator comes in through the top of the cowl and from inside the cab. Of course, these funky Cyclops headlights are not original, and they're going to need to be removed and the aluminum patched so water doesn't get in here. Another unique feature of the Swamp Spryte is the undercarriage. Obviously, to be able to float, it has to be sealed up, and that was done once again with sheet aluminum and rivets from the factory. Unfortunately, it looks like somebody tried to reskin the bottom with siding from a trailer house or something. So, just like the outer skin, this will all need to be replaced and sealed before we ever try to float. Now, the cab area is also very unique on the Swamp Spryte because they couldn't put the doors down low in the body because, of course, that would let water in. So they had to bring the doors up higher, so you had to literally step up over and into the vehicle to get in. Of course, that required a rear hinge door to give you side access, and it also required an upper hatch so you could step up into the vehicle. Then, of course, you kind of fell down into this thing, pulled the door shut, and tried to reach back and get this one. And there you go. And now you're locked in. And you hope it floats. Inside, the controls are pretty standard Snowcat with twin steering levers, and of course you have complete gauges, and fortunately all of the cab and the interior and the outer skin up here on the cowl are completely original and untouched right down to the rivets, so that's good. The rear of the Swamp Spryte has its own personality as well, with angled rear platforms and a center area that allows access to step up into the bed. You're not going to find a tailgate on one of these things. To keep everything compact, the exhaust was routed through the center of the body and then exits above the waterline in the rear. However, you're not supposed to be able to look down through the center and out the bottom. So obviously there needs to be some reskinning done back here as well. And finally, an electric bilge pump was standard equipment to suck up any leaking water that gathered inside and pump it out the side. Now, like most Thiokol vehicles, the cargo area back here was pretty much left open so people could modify it to fit their needs. And there's been some pretty good modifications done back here. Like these removable side slats, that's cool, we'll keep those. And these benches, which not only give you a place to sit, but also a place to store some cargo. Unfortunately, one touch of the old cracked upholstery and one look at the rotten plywood backing tells us that this all is going to need to be replaced with new materials. But that's a fairly easy fix. However, not all the modifications that were done were good ones. The plywood floor access panel is a good idea, but the massive motorhome muffler underneath and the home heater vent in the floor above it are not good ideas. Neither is the metal cage that was welded right in the middle of the floor in the rear to cover the wayward exhaust system. This will all need to be redone and the exhaust rerouted to open up the floor space, because this is where you enter the vehicle in the rear.
If you like cars, if you like coffee, you're gonna love Gearz coffee cars. Because in each pack, you'll find a special blend of rich, robust coffee to get your blood pumping, as well as a collectible cartoon sticker and matching photo card of some of the wildest vehicles Stacey has built or featured over the years. Collect the whole series and be sure to keep an eye out for the ultra-rare Strange Brew card that are added to random packages to keep things interesting. It's Gearz coffee cars, the best bean on the car scene.
Hey, welcome back. If you're just getting here, man, you have missed a lot because we're walking through the unique history and design of this ultra-rare 1963 Thiokol Swamp Spryte. And we're laying out some of the restoration work that we're going to do to the body. At this point, we're ready to talk about the mechanicals. And the first question that people ask about something like this is what kind of engine is in it? And I'd love to tell you it's some cool hot rod thing or something exotic or some sort of V8, but in spite of the fact that these look like a tank, they're not that heavy. And the area here in the center where the engine goes is pretty narrow. So, the little 170 cubic inch Ford Straight 6 is what the factory put in here. Yep, that's the same engine that you're going to find in a classic Mustang or Falcon or pickup truck. And this is good news because these engines are extremely reliable, they're cheap to rebuild and get parts for, and there's a lot of upgrades available to make them run better. Now, behind the engine is kind of odd because you can see there's no transmission, just a bell housing with a clutch to disengage the engine. Not sure why Thiokol did this, it was probably experimental, but this setup puts a lot of strain on the brake steer differential. So, we are going to make some changes down in here. Not enough to affect the originality, we don't want to do that. But we got to do some upgrades to the engine and the transmission to make this thing more drivable off-road, in off-camber situations, on steep hills, and definitely in the water. Now, as you can see, the motor runs great. And it holds decent oil pressure. So there's no reason to rebuild it, but the exhaust manifold is cracked. The carb needs to be rebuilt. The fuel system is jerry-rigged. There are gaskets leaking everywhere. And the wiring is exposed and cracked and waiting for the opportunity to ignite some leaky fuel. So obviously doing a general cleanup and replacing leaky gaskets is always a good place to start. Okay, now comes the fun part because we're going to lay out some upgrades that's going to make that little 6-cylinder really come alive. First of all, to take care of that broken exhaust manifold, we got a brand new cast iron one from Scott Drake. Then to take care of our leaks, we got a bunch of gaskets from Mr. Gasket. And then instead of rebuilding that old carburetor, we're just going to replace it with this Sniper fuel injection from Holley. Now, notice this is made for the little 1-barrel Autolite carburetor. So this is a direct replacement for what's on there. And of course you have all the sensors, the plug-ins. This will even work with your stock air cleaner, or of course you can upgrade that as well. Now, if you're putting on fuel injection, it's probably a good idea to upgrade your ignition. So this is the Holley HyperSpark billet distributor. This is the matching coil. And of course, this is the ignition box. Once again, all made to plug and play into each other and plug and play right into that Sniper. So we have air, we have fuel, we have spark, we have fuel injection, which is a good thing to put on any kind of off-road vehicle. And this kind of stuff has not been available for these little 6-cylinders until now. So that is cool.
A successful automotive project takes planning and organization, but instead of using an old tablet or notebook, there's the Gearz Deluxe Project Planning Book. This was designed to help you lay out a project, the parts, the tools, costs, and keep it organized with colored tabs, a pouch for receipts, and even a place to attach photos. If you decide to sell the vehicle, it serves as a complete history of what's been done. If you have a project or plan on starting one, the Gearz Project Planning Book is the best way to lay it out and make it happen. Can't get enough Gearz? Make sure to check out the Tales of a Gearhead podcast, where Stacey brings a lifetime of automotive knowledge, friendships, and expertise to the listener. Also, check out our social media channels for updates and videos of Gearz projects, as well as special contests, giveaways, and events. If you have a vehicle you want to enter into What Are You Working On?, go to staceydavid.com and submit it. There's also the online store and tons of other Gearhead information that will encourage you to get out there, build something, and go drive it.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz and a resurrection of this old Thiokol Swamp Spryte. Now, we've already laid out some of the modifications we're going to do to the engine and the drivetrain, but that's not all that needs attention here. No, because the fuel tank is almost always a problem on an older vehicle, and this is no exception. Take a look. The original tank is long gone from underneath the passenger seat, and an ill-fitting plastic tank was stuffed under one of the rear benches without proper clearance for the filler neck or the vents. This is pretty typical backyard butchery. So to fix that, we went to Tanks Inc. for a new tank and a whole bunch of accessories to take care of that fuel problem. Now, the fuel tank, as you can see, is a universal rectangular stainless steel tank. It has internal baffling, it's got all the flanges, and it's powder coated, so it's nice and durable. And you can see here we have the sending unit, then here's our ins and outs, and then right here is where our filler neck would go. Of course, that's a traditional style there, but what we're gonna do is put an angle there, then we're gonna go with a 60-degree tube, which is gonna take the fuel filler right out the side of the vehicle. Then we have this really cool low-profile filler neck. You rotate and you take it off, and that is how you're gonna fill your fuel tank. Okay, we have a lot of stuff laid out here to do, but what we haven't talked about is the tracks, the differential, and the brake steering. And obviously the tracks are shot, so we're gonna send those off to Right Track Systems in Canada and have them build some new ones. For the steering and differential, the only way to troubleshoot those is to drive the vehicle. So we're gonna fire up this old beast, and we're gonna take those 60-year-old tracks and all those decades of backyard hacking that's been done to this thing, we're gonna put it through the paces. What could possibly go wrong? Well, hopefully nothing. But either way, you're gonna see the incredible potential of the Swamp Spryte. The steering bands and the internal components were in excellent shape when we looked in the differential, but the levers took a little more effort than they should to turn the vehicle. So the master cylinders and the slave cylinders will need to be rebuilt and the bands adjusted. The little 6-cylinder engine had plenty of power, but swapping in an automatic and getting rid of the shifting, putting in the fuel injection is going to be really nice off-road. Now, the tracks may be old and fallen apart, but they still gave superior traction and low ground weight, giving the Spryte a very light footprint. But broken torsion springs make for a rough ride inside. Modern torsion axles will fix this problem. One of the most unique features of a tracked vehicle is the ability to bridge over logs and rocks and places that you can't even walk, let alone take something with tires. However, with no chassis flex or articulation, driving the Spryte on rough ground is a very physical experience, to say the least. So sometimes you're looking straight up in the air, and other times you're pitching forward and holding on for dear life. So it's a fun ride, and virtually nothing stops it, including mud and water. But we did draw the line at deep water. There are way too many holes on the bottom of this thing. And we're not ready to try to float. Yet.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Nick, and he's a retired veteran. He says he comes from a long line of motorheads, and he wants to pass that down to his 5 kids. So this is what he picked up. In 1968, Datsun 520 pickup. Those things are awesome, man. They're so hard to find. And he says, he was in the throes of a divorce. Now, was this before or after you drug home the Datsun? And he said he needed something to occupy his time. So he picked up the truck, pulled it home, and he got to work on it with his son. And the first thing they did is got the old motor running. And then he said, yeah, after a while, years went by, decided they wanted to upgrade the truck. So they picked up a donor vehicle, a 96 240SX, and he said one thing led to another. Then they decided they were going to freshen up the suspension, and they ended up dropping it 3 inches all the way around. And he came up with a really cool Mustang 2 rack and pinion for it as well. So once he had the suspension all dialed in, he turned his attention to the interior. He stripped it out, sanded it down, put some sound deadening in it, and he said there's 66 Mustang seats that are going to go in it. That's going to be a cool setup, man. Now, he said he still has tons of work to do on the truck. He says the fuel system, the cooling system, the brake system, yeah, that all still needs to be done. But he says he's enjoying every minute of this that he's working on with his kids because he's teaching them skills on how to solve problems. And he said that's just like his dad taught him and his grandfather before that. So, man, that is awesome. And he says his plan for this, once it's done, he's going to teach his 10-year-old how to drive, because he says this truck has a millennial anti-theft device, a 5-speed manual. Well, Nick, that is going to be an awesome project, man. If you ever want to get rid of that truck, I have been looking for one of those. They're so cool. Can't wait to see it. So, Nick, to recognize that cool Datsun project, we're going to give you an English wheel. It's a small one, but it is a fully functional English wheel made by Woodward Fab. It's called a little wheelie. As you can see, it's got all the anvils. It's got a whole number of rollers for doing different contours. This is a great piece for shaping metal. Then we're going to give you a Gearz fender cover. And then we're going to add to that this deluxe project planning book. This will allow you to keep track of everything that you're doing to that Datsun. Then we're going to throw in some of our new Gearz coffee cars. Now, inside of this, you're going to find a top quality coffee to keep you awake while you're working. And there's also a collectible sticker that your kids can fight over. Which sticker is it? I don't know. You're going to have to open the pack to find out. And then, because you're a veteran, we're going to give you a Sergeant Rock diecast. Now, for the rest of you guys, if you want to get in on this and get your projects featured on the show, you got to send them to us. Go to our website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit it into What Are You Working On? The website's also the place to find out more information on any products you may have seen on the show, any Gearz merchandise, and how to join Gearz Nation. Also, make sure you check out our social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all at Official Stacey David. YouTube is also the place to view all of your favorite Gearz episodes, as well as the Gearz Restoration Series and our full project builds that follow a project from beginning to end. And finally, if you're a radio person, be sure and check out our podcast, Tales of a Gearhead. All right, that wraps it up for us today, which means it is time for you to get out there and start working on something. If you've got kids like Nick does, it can be some of the most enjoyable time that you'll spend with them. It can also be some of the most frustrating. But either way, it's worth it. So get out there, get yourself something, and start working on it. We'll see you next time.